The grand hall of the city's most prestigious university shimmered with pride that morning. Banners hung from the ceiling, declaring the seminar, "The Future of Mathematics." Rows of brilliant students and professors filled the seats, their conversations buzzing with theories and debates. At the very front, across the enormous chalkboard, stretched an equation so monstrous it looked more like art than math. For weeks, the brightest minds had tried to solve it, and failed. Standing in the shadows near the side wall was Naila, a woman in her late 30s, dressed in a plain uniform, carrying a tray of steaming cups. She was a tea server of a university, invisible to everyone except when someone called, "Tea! Over here!" She moved quietly, placing cups on desks, avoiding eye contact. Nobody cared who she was, where she came from, or what her story might be. To them, she was just a servant. But as she placed a cup on a professor's desk, her eyes drifted to the chalkboard. Her breath caught. Those numbers, those symbols, they weren't foreign to her. They were old friends she hadn't seen in years. "Impossible," she whispered under her breath. Her hand trembled slightly as she set down the next cup. Memories rushed back. Nights spent in libraries, chalk dust on her fingers, journals filled with equations. But that life was gone. No one here knew she had ever been anything else. Suddenly, laughter broke through the room. A student at the back, smirking, pointed directly at her. "Why don't we let her try? Maybe the tea lady will succeed where professors failed." The room burst into laughter. Some students slapped their desks. Even a few professors chuckled, though they quickly covered it with coughs. Naila froze, the tray heavy in her hands. Her cheeks burned. She wanted to disappear. But then, the head professor, an old man with sharp eyes, smiled faintly. "Well, why not? Let's see what happens when simplicity meets complexity." The hall quieted. Everyone turned toward her. Naila's heart pounded in her chest. Every instinct screamed to shake her head, to walk away, to pretend she hadn't heard. But another voice inside, an old, buried part of her, whispered, "This is your chance." Slowly, she placed the tray down. Her legs felt weak as she walked to the front. 1,000 eyes followed her every step. She picked up the chalk, her fingers brushing against its familiar texture. The board loomed before her. The impossible equation. The laughter, the whispers, the disbelief pressed down on her like a mountain. Taking a deep breath, she raised a hand. The first stroke of chalk echoed in the silence. And just like that, the room that had mocked her fell into utter stillness. The chalk felt cold and strange in Naila's fingers. For years, she had only held cups, trays, and teapots. But today, her hand trembled with an old familiarity, like a musician touching an instrument after decades. The massive equation stretched across the board, dense and intimidating. To most, it looked like chaos. To Naila, it was a puzzle begging to be solved. She closed her eyes for a second. In her mind, the symbols rearranged themselves, shifting into patterns only she could see. A forgotten rhythm returned. When she opened her eyes, they no longer carried fear. They carried focus. She began writing. At first, the students leaned back in their chairs, smirking. "Look at her. She's just scribbling. This is going to be embarrassing." But soon their smile faltered. Her hand moved with precision, no hesitation, no guessing. Each number, each symbol connected perfectly to the next. She was not fumbling in the dark. She was following a path only she seemed to know. Whispers spread across the hall. "Wait! That's a legitimate approach." She's reducing it step by step." The professor leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. His jaw tightened. "Impossible. How does she know this method?" Naila didn't hear them. Her world had narrowed to the chalkboard. She whispered softly as she worked, her voice barely audible. "Factor here, substitute this, simplify." The chalk scratched rapidly, the once monstrous equation shrinking with every line. What had stumped brilliant minds for months was unraveling under her hand like thread from a tangled cloth. The hall was so silent, the faint squeak of chalk felt deafening. Students exchanged glances, disbelief mixing with awe. Some professors shifted uncomfortably, their pride pricked by the sight of a simple tea server accomplishing what they could not. Finally, after what felt like hours but had only been minutes, she reached the end. The final line appeared, neat and undeniable. Naylor put the chalk down. Her chest rose and fell heavily. She turned slowly, facing the room that had mocked her. "This," she said quietly, "is the answer." For a heartbeat, there was silence. Not a cough, not a shuffle, just stunned faces. Then gasps echoed through the hall like a wave. The head professor stood up so abruptly that his chair scraped against the floor. He rushed forward, eyes wide, scanning the board. His hands trembled as he traced each line of her solution. At last, he turned to the audience, his voice shaking. She's absolutely correct." The room erupted, not in laughter this time, but in sheer disbelief and awe. And Naylor? She simply stepped back, lowering her gaze, as if nothing extraordinary had happened at all. The hall was still buzzing with disbelief. Students stood from their seats, craning their necks to see the solution on the board. Some even rushed forward, notebooks in hand, copying every line before it vanished. But the loudest silence came from professors. Men and women who had dedicated their lives to mathematics sat frozen, their pride shattered. The head professor, Dr. Cameron, remained at the board, staring at the solution as if it were a miracle. Then, slowly, he turned to Naylor. "Who are you?" His voice trembled with genuine curiosity, not mockery this time. All eyes snapped back to her. Naylor lowered her gaze, her hands twisted in front of her apron. "No one," she whispered. "Just the tea lady." But the whole refused to accept that answer. One of the younger professors stood abruptly. "No, this level of brilliance, it doesn't come from nowhere. Where did you learn this?" The students began whispering again. Could she be a former professor? Maybe she studied abroad. Or is she some hidden genius? Naylor shook her head quickly, backing away from the board. "Please, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'll go back to work." She turned, almost fleeing toward the door. But Dr. Cameron's voice stopped her. "Wait!" His tone carried authority, and the entire hall obeyed the command as if it were law. Naylor froze, her hand trembling on the doorknob. "Years ago," Dr. Cameron continued slowly, "there was a rumor of a young woman prodigy, a mathematician who could solve the unsolvable. She vanished, without publishing her research, without leaving a trace. Some said she gave up, others said tragedy forced her away." The students leaned forward, their eyes darting between the professor and the tea lady who stood stiffly by the door. Dr. Cameron's eyes softened. "Tell me, child, are you her?" Naylor's chest tightened. Memories rushed back, the late nights in her tiny apartment, stacks of papers filled with equations, the letter that had shattered her dreams, the accident that had forced her into a different life. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For a moment, the entire room held its breath, waiting for her answer. But instead of confirming or denying, Naylor shook her head and whispered, "I am no one." Then she opened the door and slipped out, leaving the stunned hall behind. Inside the seminar hall, however, the whispers only grew louder. "No one? After this. She's hiding something. We must find out the truth." And among the crowd, a sharp-eyed student named Adil muttered under his breath, "She may want to hide, but I'll uncover her story." The echo of Naylor's footsteps faded down the empty corridor as she hurried back toward the cafeteria. Her hands were still shaking, her mind racing. She hated the spotlight, hated the questions. For years, she had lived quietly, invisible, carrying her pain in silence. And now, because of one foolish challenge, it was all unraveling. She pushed through the cafeteria doors, grabbed a tray of teacups, and tried to lose herself in routine. But inside her chest, her heart thudded like a drum. Meanwhile, back in the seminar hall, chaos stirred. Students surrounded the chalkboard, photographing the solution before it could be erased. "This isn't just brilliance, it's history in the making," one whispered. Professor Cameron rubbed his temples, deep in thought. He wasn't a man easily impressed, yet what he had witnessed shook him to the core. He had spent half his career chasing this very equation. And this woman, their tea lady, had solved it as though she was simply remembering an old lullaby. He clenched his jaw. This can't stay hidden. At the same time, the ambitious student Adil slipped out of the hall, his eyes glinting with determination. He had always been hungry for recognition, always searching for shortcuts to glory. And now, he smelled an opportunity. If she's really the lost genius they whispered about, he muttered to himself, then uncovering her past could make me famous too. He began following her trail. Down the corridor, he saw her through the cafeteria doors, back in her plain uniform, serving tea as though nothing had happened. He narrowed his eyes. No one solves equations like that unless they've lived and breathed mathematics. She's hiding something big. Later that evening, Naila sat alone in her tiny rented room. The tray of teacups was gone, her apron folded neatly on the chair. She pulled out a small wooden box from under her bed. Inside were old papers, yellowed with time, pages filled with equations, scribbles, and diagrams. Among them was a faded photograph, a younger Naila, standing proudly at a chalkboard, her eyes alive with passion. Her fingers lingered on the picture. A tear slid down her cheek. "That girl is gone," she whispered. "She died the day the world stopped believing in her." But outside her door, a shadow loomed. Adil had followed her home. He crouched quietly, peering through a crack, watching as she held the papers close to her chest. His lips curled into a smile. "So, it's true," he whispered. "You're not just a tea lady. You're someone the world needs to know about." But whether his intentions were noble or selfish remained a dangerous question. The next morning, the university buzzed with rumors. Everywhere in the corridors, students whispered about the mystery tea lady who had solved the impossible problem. Some called her a genius, others a fraud. But one thing was certain, she was no ordinary woman. In the cafeteria, Naila kept her head down, pouring tea into cups and pretending not to hear. Yet she could feel the stares prickling against her back. Professor Cameron entered quietly, his sharp eyes searching for her. When he spotted Naila, he didn't approach directly. Instead, he sat at a corner table, watching. There was a heaviness in his expression, like a man who had finally glimpsed an old ghost he thought he'd never see again. Meanwhile, in another corner, Adil sat with his phone, scrolling through old research archives. He had stayed up all night digging into academic records, hunting for any mention of a young female mathematician from years ago. And then, he found it, a forgotten journal entry, a paper signed under the name Dr. Naila Saeed. Published a decade ago, then abruptly withdrawn. The notes ended abruptly, like a story cut in half. Adil's eyes widened. So it's true, she was someone once. That evening, Adil didn't waste time. He knocked on Naila's door. Inside, she froze. No one ever came to her tiny room. She hesitated, then opened it slightly. Adil stood there, holding printed pages. "I know who you are." Her blood ran cold. He stepped inside without waiting for permission and laid the papers on her small wooden table. The faded research paper stared back at her like a ghost from another life. "You were Dr. Naila Saeed," he said softly. "The prodigy who shocked the mathematics world. And then you disappeared. Why?" Naila's knees weakened. She sat heavily on the bed, her hands trembling. Her secret was out. Memories she had locked away surged back. The university abroad that once welcomed her with applause. The jealousy of colleagues who mocked her because she was a woman. The betrayal of a mentor who took credit for her work. And the car accident that had taken everything from her in a single night. Tears welled in her eyes. "That life is gone," she whispered. "I'm no one now, just a tea lady." But Adil leaned closer, his eyes burning with ambition. "No, you're not no one. You're the key to rewriting history, and I won't let you hide anymore." The words felt less like encouragement and more like a threat. And in that dimly lit room, Naila realized something chilling. Her past wasn't just chasing her. It was about to trap her all over again. The next day, whispers had turned into headlines. An online student blog posted a blurry picture of Naila at the chalkboard with a caption, "Mystery Woman Outsmarts University's Best Minds." The photo spread like wildfire. By noon, the entire campus, and beyond, was talking about her. Naila sat in the cafeteria corner, her hands clasped tightly, her heart sinking deeper with every passing minute. This was exactly what she feared. The life she had carefully hidden was slipping into the open. Across campus, Professor Cameron paced his office. He had already confirmed what he suspected. Naila Saeed wasn't just a gifted woman. She was once a rising star, whose research papers had shaken the mathematics community. And then, overnight, she had vanished. He whispered to himself, what could have broken someone so brilliant? But while the professor's mind filled with concern, Adil's burned with ambition. In his dorm room, he typed furiously on his laptop. He was drafting a blog post, framing himself as a discoverer of the lost genius. His plan was simple: reveal her true identity to the world, but make sure he looked like the hero who brought her back. Late in the evening, Adil once again approached Naila. This time, his tone was sharper, almost manipulative. "You don't understand, Miss Naila," he said, laying his phone on her table with the blog draft open. "The world needs to know who you are. You can't just hide forever." Her voice cracked. "You don't want to help me. You want to use me." His silence confirmed it. But before he could argue, there was a knock at the door. Professor Cameron stood outside, his tall figure filling the doorway. His voice was calm, yet firm. "Naila, we need to talk." Adil stiffened. "Professor, what are you doing here?" Cameron's eyes flicked to him, cold and knowing. "The question is, Adil, what are you doing here?" The air grew heavy. Naila looked from one man to the other, one filled with hunger for glory, the other with something she hadn't felt in years: respect. Her heart raced. She knew she was standing at a crossroads. If she let either of them decide her fate, she could lose everything again. And this time, maybe forever. The silence in Naila's tiny room felt like a battlefield. Adil stood with clenched fists, his eyes flashing with ambition. Professor Cameron, calm but stern, faced him like a shield. And between them sat Naila, fragile yet carrying storms within her. Cameron broke the silence first. "Adil, if you truly respect knowledge, you protect her, not exploit her." But Adil smirked. "Respect doesn't change the world, Professor. Exposure does. Imagine the headlines: Adil discovers a forgotten genius. Do you know what that would mean for my career?" Naila's throat tightened. She whispered, "You're willing to ruin me for fame." Adil didn't deny it. He picked up his phone, waved it slightly, and walked out with a cold smile. "The truth will come out, whether you like it or not." The door slammed shut. Naila collapsed onto the chair, her face pale. Cameron moved closer, his voice softening. "Don't worry. I won't let anyone hurt you." But Naila shook her head. "You don't understand. If the world finds me again, it won't be admiration I'll receive. It'll be questions about my past, about the accident." Her voice cracked at the last word. Cameron wanted to ask more, but he stopped himself. He could see she wasn't ready to relive the pain. Meanwhile, across campus, Adil was already in the computer lab. His fingers flew over the keyboard as he uploaded the blog post. He added photos, quotes, even a copy of her old research paper. His heart raced with excitement. At midnight, the article went live. By morning, it had spread across academic circles. Professors, journalists, and even international researchers were sharing it. The lost genius, Dr. Naila Saeed, had been found. Back in the cafeteria, students stared at Naila openly now, not with curiosity, but with awe and suspicion. Some whispered, "Is that really her?" Others snapped pictures, sending them across social media. Naila's hand trembled so badly she spilled tea on the counter. Her worst nightmare had begun. Professor Cameron rushed to her side. "Don't panic. We'll handle this." But deep inside, Naila knew this wasn't just the world remembering her. It was a past she had buried, clawing its way back to life. By the next morning, the university gates were crowded with reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. Everyone wanted a glimpse of the woman who had returned from shadows. Inside, students buzzed with excitement, whispering her name like a legend. Professor Cameron tried to shield her, but the dean summoned Naila urgently. In the conference hall, faculty members, journalists, and curious students filled the seats. The dean's voice was sharp. "Miss Naila, or should I say Dr. Naila Saeed, is it true? Are you the same mathematician who vanished years ago?" Dozens of eyes bore into her. Her hands trembled, but then she looked up steadying herself. "Yes," she whispered. "I am Naila Saeed." A collective gasp filled the room. And then, just as the whispers rose, a journalist stood up and asked the one question she dreaded most. "If you were such a genius, why did you disappear? What are you hiding?" Her breath caught in her chest. She wasn't ready, but the truth was now knocking louder than ever. The hall went silent. The question hung in the air like a blade. "What are you hiding?" Naila's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She looked at the sea of faces, some curious, some judgmental, some sympathetic. For years she had run from this moment, but now there was no escape. She stood, her voice trembling but strong enough to carry through the room. "Yes, I disappeared. Not because I stopped being a mathematician, but because I failed as a human being." A hush fell. Even the cameras stopped clicking. She continued, her words heavy with grief. "Years ago, during a major international conference, I presented an equation, an ambitious model I believed could revolutionize engineering. But in my pride, I ignored a small error. That mistake led to a failed experiment, an accident, and someone lost their life because of it." Gasps rippled through the audience. Naila's voice cracked. "I couldn't live with the guilt. I didn't deserve praise or fame. So I walk away from everything. From mathematics. From myself." Tears streamed freely now, but she didn't hide them. "I took simple jobs, disappeared into the crowd, because I thought, if the world forgot me, maybe I could forget myself." The hall was frozen. For the first time, they weren't seeing a prodigy or a legend. They were seeing a human being, flawed, broken, yet courageous enough to bear her truth. Professor Cameron stepped forward, his voice gentle yet firm. "You made a mistake, Naila. But mistakes don't erase brilliance. They make it human. True greatness isn't never falling. It's standing again after you've fallen." The dean, visibly moved, whispered, "Perhaps it's time the world saw not just your past, but your future." Even some journalists lowered their cameras, ashamed of their earlier hunger for scandal. Students who once mocked her now sat in awe, their eyes filled with respect. Naila looked around, her heart pounding. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was running. Maybe her past would always haunt her, but now she wasn't hiding anymore. And as the applause slowly rose in the hall, soft at first, then thundering, Naila realized something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. Sparkles the end sparkles.